financial details are a huge piece to any short-term trip. And there's a number of features that you'll find here in ServiceReef. So let's just kind of walk through a few things here. The first is, does the registrant have to pay for or raise money for this trip? Most of the time it's going to be yes. There are certain events that you won't have to do that. It might be a local serving event or something like that. But for the most part, it's going to be yes. And then there's going to be a total cost that the person has to raise. And then when is that due by? Now, one note to make here is that you will put in a standard cost for everybody that's going to show up on the event page for your short-term trip. Now, that can be adjusted per person. We have many organizations that someone would be potentially flying in from another city, and you might need to add on another $300 for them to raise to cover additional airfare or something to that effect. But this is the total cost for the trip. Do you want to allow donations to be collected? Most of the time, again, it's going to be yes. It would be no in a case maybe like a retreat where people just have to pay for their fee to come. Do you want to show the total amount to be raised and the balance remaining on the personal fundraising page? Now, this field, I would say most organizations would say no. The reason that you show it is it's just nice to see a progress bar. But the reason that organizations choose to turn this off is they want to allow for what we call over fundraising, where you might have someone on the trip that raises 120% of their trip, but then there's another person that hasn't raised their funds to that full 100%. So you might shift some funds from one person to another. The next field is asking for, do you want to allow the user to edit their personal fundraising page? Now, every user that participates in a short-term trip has a personal fundraising page, and they can go in and edit that. We'll talk about that somewhere else. But the question is here, do you want to allow them to edit that page? Yes or no? Now, the only case where you would potentially be turning that off is if you might be going to a restricted access area and you just want to control the messaging on that page, which ties into the second piece and to that question is, do you want to approve personal fundraising pages before they're published? So essentially what happens is the person can go in, they can make changes to their personal fundraising page, but that's going to send an alert to you as the admin, and you decide yes or no, I'm going to approve that or I'm going to make edits to it. There is a field here for default personal fundraising text, and we always recommend that you give your audience, your participants, some type of something to start from, some wireframe or boilerplate to start with. And this is we've given some tips and some thoughts here to what you might encourage them to do. You can note in deposits and milestones down here, so it might be 50% fundraising you can do, or however you lay out your milestones for fundraising. And then there's a field for donations to the organization. Do you want to do this, and then how much? And essentially this is raising additional funds for, say, medical supplies. So you know that everybody individually has to raise $2,500, but this would be a field to raise an additional $5,000 or $10,000. You can put in a donation deadline and then an event code. And the event code typically is generated from your organization's accounting department, but they might have a GL or some type of an account code per event, and you can put that in here. And then as you're doing system reconciliation on your finances, at least you can tie together the finances and donations that have come in for this trip to the GL codes or the event codes that you have in your accounting software.